Welcome to the Focus 3 podcast with Tim and Brian Kite. This is podcast number 35. And I'm going alone today. Well, actually, I'm not going alone. I have a guest. My guest is Dr. John Marshausen. And super happy, John, to have you on the podcast today.
Thanks. I'm excited to be here.
Yeah. So the reason why I've asked John to be on the episode, I've been doing R-Factor teaching. I've been doing keynotes and training and leadership and culture for well over 30 years. And every time I give a presentation, whether it's a keynote or a brief workshop or a long workshop, particularly R-Factor, every single time in a business and organizational setting, people have asked me, when are you going to make this available in schools? Because they get taught E plus R equals O, and they learn the disciplines, and they press pause and get your mind right and step up. And everyone who has children said, I want my kids to be taught that principle. I want my kids to be taught those skills and disciplines. And what's really exciting is, as a result of our work with Ohio State football, Dr. Marshausen heard about us. And John is the superintendent in Hilliard City Schools. I'm going to ask him in a moment to give us a background about the school and the school district and the demographics and the makeup. And John heard about our work at Ohio State, and he contacted me and asked if I would speak at administrative retreat. And I did, and presented a 90-minute overview of E plus R equals O. And John and his administrative leadership made the decision to commit to teaching R-Factor to everyone in the school district, in the Hilliard City, everyone, administrators, teachers, classified staff, students. And I want you all to hear about the Hilliard journey, and they're still on that journey. So we're going to talk to Dr. Marshausen about leadership, culture, and R-Factor at Hilliard City Schools. Let's get to work. So John, again, thank you for joining me today. This is real. I've wanted to do this for a while, and the schedules are always difficult. Yours is, mine is, Brian's is, but here we are. We're here in your building in Hilliard. And real quick, tell our listeners, first of all, about the Hilliard City School District. Talk about the makeup, the demographics, the size, the students, the buildings. Talk about your school district. Give us an overview.
Hilliard City Schools is located in suburban Columbus, Ohio. In fact, part of our district is actually within the city of Columbus. We serve almost 17,000 students in 3 high schools, 3 middle schools, 2 standalone 6th grade buildings, 14 elementary schools, an innovative learning campus, which next year will have 2,500 6th, 7th, 8th, 9th, 10th, 11th, and 12th graders that go through there, at least for part of their day. We are a diverse suburban school district. We are about 25% free and reduced lunch. We have homes in our community that range from Section 8 housing to over $1 million. In fact, Hilliard, Ohio was named this year by Realtor.com as one of the 10 hottest housing markets in the United States. And one of the reasons that report cited was our school district. And we're extremely proud of how we serve those students. Have kids from 40 different countries that speak 44 different languages.
So, say that again.
40 different countries that speak 44 different languages.
Wow.
We're actually opening a welcome center next year for students who don't speak enough English to really fit into our traditional classrooms, where those students will get to be together. And then as soon as they're able to function and understand how school works, then we'll get them off to their home schools and get them acclimated and on their learning journey.
How many employees do you have, and how many of those employees are teachers?
We have about 1,800 employees, and about 1,200 of those employees are teachers.
So you've got roughly 22 buildings, and give or take a few, if I counted that up correctly, and you have over 1,000 teachers and a lot of administrators. So why did you reach out to Focus 3, and what was it about what you heard that we do that interested you with regard to the potential of installing our system in a school district, in your school district?
Well, I think first of all, and there are a lot of people who talk about culture over planning or culture over strategy. And I'm a true believer that culture is how you drive results. And in the work that you've done, which got a lot of publicity after the Ohio State success, and when we look at that culture piece, when you have the skill, when you have the talent, when you have the ability, how do you get to that next level? By creating a culture where everyone strives to get better. And there are so many books out there and tactics, and you can read and read and read and listen to all of these different things. And there are bits of pieces of all of it that's amazing, but there was never that simple implementation plan to bring it all together for your culture. And when we heard about E plus R equals O, and when you came in and met with our team in the summer and talked about, hey, there are 6 things that are part of this R factor process, that those 6 things fit with everything that you try to do. And they're applicable regardless of your religion or your socioeconomics. It allows you to take your belief system and put consistency in message and consistency in behavior. And with that alignment, when you get everybody on the same page, going in the same direction, and most importantly, speaking the same language, the efficiency and effectiveness of what you do skyrockets.
So I've heard you say on several occasions something I've heard Coach Meyer say on several occasions, and that is there's not a whole lot in R Factor that you didn't already believe or know, but what R Factor did and what Focus 3 did, it provided you with an actionable, a simple, clear, actionable system for implementing what you already believed more effectively. Is that a true statement?
Yes, and when you look at teachers today, and those of us in the education community can talk about it always seems like there's an ad. We're always asking people to do more and more. And with the evolution of assessments and the accountability movement, we keep putting more and more on. And this was so easy to implement with our staff because it was, folks, we're not asking you to do anything new. In fact, we're clarifying what we all believe in our inner core. Mm-hmm. In our heart of heart and soul of souls, this is what we believe. And if we do it better together and we're aligned in our efforts, not only isn't it new, it makes everything else easier.
Yeah. So step number 1. Well, first of all, go back to administrative retreat. And I didn't prep you with what I was going to ask you. So this may come as a little bit not so much off the wall as, I don't know if you remember this. What was it that I said at the administrative retreat? What was it that was presented in those 90 minutes that really got your attention? I know in my mind there was like a defining moment for me, and I'll share mine in a moment. What got your attention in the presentation I gave to your administrative leadership?
When we got to make a difference, and we were talking about how do you take your beliefs and your values and your structure to make a difference in the lives of your employees, in the functioning of your organization, there is a point in that make a difference presentation when if you looked around our room and there are 85 administrators who are in the second day of a retreat, that's what we strive to do, is make a difference. And we had spent the whole first day going over the new stuff, going over what we're going to do. And you came in and gave us a system that when we all started to think about, wait a second here, folks, this is what we need to bring all of our stuff together. And we get to work with kids. And we get to work with kids with the diversity I talked about before. We have an opportunity to make a difference every day, and we want that to be a positive difference. And for me, it was in that make a difference moment that I was just like, yeah, I need to follow up. And I don't know if you remember, I called you on the way home.
Oh, I remember. I remember.
So it really lit a spark under me.
It was an interesting experience for me because, real quick, let me go back to make sure everyone listening understands. So E plus R equals O is event plus response equals outcome. And there are 6 disciplines for managing the R. Number 1 is press pause. Number 2 is get your mind right. 3 is step up. 4 is adjust and adapt. 5 is make a difference. And then 6 is build skill. So John is referencing R Factor discipline number 5, which is make a difference. And the principle that we communicate is your R is an E for others. How you manage your attitude, how you manage your decisions and actions, has an impact beyond just yourself. It affects other people.
And how big is that for me as the superintendent to think that I have the opportunity to create outcomes that are better for the people with whom I'm work, and that trickles down. And then when you start putting that when we start thinking about that as educators in the frame of a teacher, their response to every situation is an E for every kid in that classroom. And that's when it kind of
creates a culture.
Yeah. And that's what we know we want to be able to create in our school district.
So from my experience was I'm delivering this R-Factor overview to you guys. I've given this keynote thousands of times over the course of 30 years, and I'm always energized about giving the keynote. I never get tired of it. In fact, the opposite. I get more excited every time I deliver it. And just the older I get, the more energized I get about the message. And I'm delivering the message, but I'm delivering it to public school administrators in suburban Columbus, Ohio. And I don't know what they think. I didn't know your guys' mindset. I didn't know the receptivity. I saw the body language and the facial expressions were very positive, but I'd had some experiences with public educators in the past where they didn't want anything that came from the business world. And I kind of went in with the assumption that people would receive it okay, but I didn't anticipate there would be an enthusiastic receptivity. So I'm giving the message, and I don't know if you remember this, but I turned and we talk about two kinds of R-Factor behavior, discipline-driven and default-driven. There's a line in life, and above the line is discipline-driven behavior, which is most effective, and there's default-driven behavior, which is less effective. And I gave that message, and near the end of the presentation, I said, it just came to my mind, my heart, and I said, you know what I think the mission of education is to equip young people with the skills and tools to fight and win the above-the-line battle, to fight and win the discipline-driven battle. And I think if you graduate a student with academic skills but not behavior skills, I'm not sure you've done your job. And then I held my breath because I thought they're going to throw me out. They're not going to like that answer. But it was exactly the opposite of what I'd anticipate. Everyone loved that message. Why? What was it about that above-the-line, discipline-driven behavior skill in addition to academic skills that your administrators got so excited about?
Well, you are at the exact right time in public education with this message, because the message we're hearing from colleges and universities, the messages we're hearing from workforce development, the messages we're hearing from our military recruiters, everything our kids would do after graduation, we're hearing from them that your kids have the academic skill base, but they don't have, and in education terms, we'll talk about grit. We'll talk about growth mindset. We'll talk about social emotional learning. So since the time you hit public educators, and Focus 3 and Tim Kite's message came at the perfect time for the Hilliard City Schools, because that's what we're hearing to live our mission. And our mission statement is to prepare every student to be ready for tomorrow. Well, ready for tomorrow is both.
Exactly. So hold on a second. So you and I, obviously, how many years now have we worked with you guys?
4
years. So
going into 5.
Yeah, the ready for tomorrow is a message that I immediately connected with, that I immediately felt, and you just said something really interesting. I want to make sure our listeners tap into. You're preparing students to go to college. You're preparing other students to go directly into the workforce. You're preparing students to go into a military career or experience. It's not purely a matter of high school, college anymore. You have a much broader, more strategic view of preparing students for whatever comes next, and it's not always college.
Yeah, and even the kids who are going to college, when you and I went to college, we were being prepared for a career.
Yes.
These students are being prepared for a world in which research would say they're going to have 10, 12, 15 careers. And the speed at which the world is moving, those life skills are what allow you to be successful, because adapt and adjust. You have to continue to be able to learn. You have to continue to be able to grow. And it's that mindset that I'm on a journey. And my journey requires me to be the best version of me each and every day. And if the kids who leave the Hilliard City Schools, when they get that diploma, are prepared to overcome obstacles, to learn from their failures and to be the best version of them each and every day, that's what's going to allow this next generation of Americans to become leaders.
This is why all of the business people who have heard us deliver the R Factor message over 30 plus years have said to us, when are you going to take this to schools? When are you going to make this available for young people today? Because parents intuitively know that behavior skills drive job skills, that behavior skills drive everything that someone does, and that having technical knowledge isn't enough if you have behavior skill gap. You know, one of the messages we deliver all the time is no amount of technical competence can overcome a behavior skill gap. And we always ask in a business setting, now we ask in education, if you ever work with someone who is really smart, is a pain in the butt to work with? And of course, everyone laughs because they all know someone. And we always jokingly say, don't look around the room, because there's probably someone in the room that fits that description. But I always also say, have you ever been that person? And we all have, right? We've all done things or had attitudes or something where we kind of got sideways, if you will. So this skill set, this toolbox, to equip students with behavior skills, the ability to manage their response, and adaptive, right? That's R4, that's adjust and adapt, is an incredible gift to young people. So what was the first thing that you did in your journey with Focus 3? What was the first thing you did to implement the system?
Well, the first thing was you and I sat down and we quickly got together a core group of diverse folks from our Hilliard Schools community, and we created our culture playbook and our beliefs, our behaviors, and our outcomes, because, again, it's about alignment.
So go back. Let's make sure, because I want to make sure that our listeners, we did a podcast on how to build a culture playbook, which I'm sure some of you listening have heard that podcast. If you haven't, go back and listen to it. So John just referred to a culture playbook, and the three elements are, what do we
believe? How do we behave? And what are the outcomes from our beliefs and our behaviors? And we built one because, and I tell folks, this isn't Tim coming in and telling you what to believe. Your beliefs and your values within your organization are already there. This is deciding how are we going to use common vocabulary and have alignment in what we say and how we behave.
So it's a template that we provided, a framework that we provided to help you focus on what we have discovered are the three critical elements, the three dimensions of an effectively written culture playbook: belief, behavior, outcome. And just from my experience again with you guys was just, again, super impressed, because you put this team together, we all got together, and the stuff started flying in the sense of brainstorming and the passion and the desire to get it clear. And we're deep believers in simplicity.
Yes.
And we saw you guys adopt that philosophy as well, and say, okay, you saw the value of clear, simple, actionable, and you came. So what are the three values, the three core beliefs that you guys came up with in the course of that process?
Well, our first belief is stand up and own it, which is individual responsibility. And I think the cool thing was, as school folks, we really came up with three simple beliefs. It was personal responsibility, teamwork, and having a growth mindset. Now, we call those stand up and own it, power of the team, think we, not me, and our passion for growth.
Slow that down just a little bit. Just I want to make sure that everyone, so your first belief is, first core value is
stand up and own it.
Stand up and own it. Okay.
Which is personal responsibility.
Own your own behavior, attitude, actions, decisions.
Correct. And it's so great now in our culture, with it's in our DNA now. When a student does something, good or bad, a principal or a teacher will say, stand up and own it.
So that is taught.
It is
and
taught,
communicated throughout the district.
Pre-K through the superintendent and everyone in between. After 4 years now of implementation, this is just part of our DNA. It's part of who we are. And we continue to build on this every year.
What's your second belief? So stand up and own it's one. What's your second
Power
one?
of the team.
Power of the team.
And we're stronger together. When we are in a group, teamwork is what these young people need to develop in order to be successful in whatever's next for them. We're not training kids to work in cubicles. We're training folks to not only make themselves better, but to make other people better. And one of the behaviors in our power of the team is to respect differences and to teach young people today that we are going to different opinions. We are going to different approaches. How do we work together to be able to say, okay, we might disagree, we might agree to disagree every once in a while. How does that help us move forward? And that is probably one of the most, well, there are three most important skills, and that's one that we take a lot of pride in and that we work really hard to get with our students.
So what's the third belief? Let's make sure we get that one, and I want to come back to the behavioral side of it. So stand up and own it's 1. Power of the team is 2. What's the third belief that you all committed to?
Our passion for growth. And what better value could you have in schools? Because that's what we do every day. But one of the behaviors that I think really encapsulates our passion for growth is the idea of embracing productive discomfort. And we list that and call that out as one of our behaviors under our passion for growth, because as adults, we don't like change. There is a natural apprehension, in some cases, fear in some people. And when you think about our teachers and the folks in our teaching ranks, and the most important resource any school district has are those professionals who are in front of the classroom each and every day. And some of them were trained in the 1980s. And if you think back to what life was like in the 1980s and the advances that we've made in technology and medicine and every communication and how things have changed, we are asking our teachers to embrace that productive discomfort every year, from the instructional to the communications to what parents' roles are. So that passion for growth isn't just in our classrooms. It's what we're doing as adults.
That's awesome. Hey, I just want to make sure that everyone understands some of us were trained in the late 60s and the early 70s, but that's another topic for another time. So you've said something a couple times here that is really important for everyone to understand, and that is you didn't, in your culture playbook, you didn't just identify core beliefs. You actually wrote down key behaviors.
Yes.
You provided a behavioral blueprint for the beliefs. And I will share that the day is over, folks, when just listing core values is sufficient to build and communicate culture. You have to behavioralize your culture. You need to have in your culture playbook or culture blueprint or culture statement, whatever you want to call it, you must be behaviorally specific. And you guys went through that process. And stand up and own it, power of the team, passion for growth. You created 3 key behaviors for each of those core beliefs, and now you've communicated those constantly to everyone in the district. John, did you take this to students right away, or what was your first step once the culture playbook was written and it was codified in a document? Then how did you? Because leaders struggle how to communicate their culture to all their people. And you've got 17,000 plus students, you've got 1,500 plus employees. How did you get the message out to all those people in 22 buildings?
We talk about leadership creates the behavior, which creates the culture. And it started by training and having our leadership team embrace the work that we did. And everything we've done with intentional planning and purposeful rollout. So we start with our culture playbook, and that starts with our administrative team. So if you and I are building this in July and August, and there were probably 30 iterations of the culture playbook as we went through it, as we're rolling through this, we're rolling through it with our administrative team. And then by the late fall, we took our culture playbook to our employees. Now, when we took it to our employees, we created what we called culture catchers. So we were able to give every employee our culture playbook in what was a foldable piece of paper similar to what you would have made in middle school when you were deciding, I was going to live in a house in a mansion and this is who I'm going to marry and this is how many children we're going to have. We created and printed culture catchers, and I went to every location and had about 28 staff meetings, where at every staff meeting we rolled out our culture playbook and our BBO, and I talked and engaged and walked everyone through it. That was just the introduction. But by the time the staff was getting the introduction, it was part of the fluent vocabulary for their administrators or their leaders.
So what was your message to your staff? We've all been in organizations. We are in organizations now. And what you said sounds wonderful. But we've all been in situations where the leader or leadership team communicates some new thing, some new initiative, some new program, and we've all been around where new culture statements are communicated. What was your message? What specifically did you tell all of the administrators and teachers that you talked to in those 28 staff meetings? And then number two, what was the response?
The message was, folks, we're not telling you anything new. We're just clarifying what we believe. And I'm not telling you what you believe. This is what we believe, and we built this together. And we use a term in Hilliard called the Hilliard Way. And the superintendent who would have been here for 30 years ago, Roger Nels, talked that Hilliard Way starts with people. So the Hilliard Way is not something new. For us to be able to say, hey, this is what we believe, and teachers believe this already. And I think it's important to say, yeah, stand up and own it. This is personal responsibility. We want our kids to be responsible for their behavior, regardless if you're a traditional disciplinarian teacher or if you're an outside-the-box voice and choice teacher. We want students to stand up and own it. So
you gave teachers freedom for how they deployed, communicated, engaged with their kids.
Yeah, I think the most important thing we did was we gave principals freedom to take the standard vocabulary for our beliefs and make it their own within their building culture. Because every building has its own culture. And when you look at the 20 square feet, when you look at the leadership space of the principal, it's not going to be the same among 14 elementaries. And as our elementaries worked with their teams to roll this out, it was rolled out 14 different ways at the building level.
That's cool. So you sensed that the only way you could lead 17,000 students, 20-plus buildings would be to equip and empower and energize the principals in the buildings for them to build their culture their way in their building, because they're going to know their building better than you. Is that
correct?
Is that an accurate statement?
Correct. And each building has its own culture, and each grade level has its own culture. So everyone embraced stand up and own it, power the team, and a passion for growth. How you embrace that was a little bit different in each space, but it was all the same message and it was all the same vocabulary. So if you hear Hilliard students, and you would hear this right now if you went to our community pool in the summer, if a kid does something sideways, the lifeguard, who may be a high school student, will say to the elementary kid, stand up and own it. And the elementary kid knows I'm going to tell the truth.
That's awesome.
And when we have those values that are given to people in the way which it hits them, where it gets to their core, and empowering them and a trust in them, that's when it becomes their own. And ultimately, that's what we want. We want everybody to own it.
So it sounds like you communicated it clearly and repeatedly, that it wasn't like one rollout meeting. It was a series of meetings and sessions, and is that how it happened?
Yeah, and you're intentional, and sometimes you feel like you're overusing it. But now, if you read anything that I've written, from articles in the newspaper to blogs, if you hear one of my Board of Education reports, if you hear our principals talk to their staff, this vocabulary is just part of what we do. It's in our fabric. And because of that, we're continuing to work and go deeper and get better at this message. But as we do that, we keep teaching it through our behaviors.
Yeah. And this is where R factor comes in. This is where E plus R equals O is a difference maker, because it's one thing to say to people in a team, an organization, hey, this is the culture we're committing to. These are the standards that we're all going to adopt, and think about them deeply, and use them as you make decisions and do stuff. R Factor is a toolbox to specifically train people in behavior skills that are necessary to live that culture. So your next step then was to take R Factor to everyone.
Yeah, while we were doing this and rolling this out to our staffs, you were here training our administrators on R Factor. And we had several days of R Factor training where you came in and worked with our administrative teams. And that was going on at the administrative level while we were doing the culture playbook across the district. And one of the mistakes, and you and I both have educators who want the shortcut to implement R Factor or E plus R equals O. And we've seen posters in other buildings that I've gone into. First, you have to know what you believe. Mm-hmm. Because before you create the R to get the outcome that you desire, you've got to know, and you all have to be on the same page. You need that alignment. Once we trained our administrative team, we then trained our administrators to be trainers. Mm-hmm. And
so you equipped them to lead.
We equipped with the same skills that you helped equip us with. Mm-hmm. And we're talking now a 12-month period. We took 6 months, and it wasn't one-day training done with R Factor. It was R Factor training for administrators and follow-up in every meeting, then discussions as we made this part of our vocabulary. And then our administrators trained their staffs over the course of the next school year.
So this is a really important and I think fascinating reality, and that is that if you want to build a great culture and you want to build behavior skill into the people who are in the organization, the behavior skill necessary to make the culture happen, this is not a quick fix. This is not something you can do quick. It's not a program that happens fast. It is a journey that happens slowly, methodically, intentionally, over time. Agreed?
Wholeheartedly agree. And, you know, when we've done surveys to look at adoption and implementation of our staff, from everything from our culture playbook now through R Factor, at the end of year one, you might get 50 to 60% in any given building that it's part of who they are. In year two, that increases to the 70%. We have some buildings that after 2 or 3 years, 90% of their staff was all in. It was part of who they are. But it takes that process because you're going to have some people who are going to run with this. You're going to have some teachers who are going to jog and some people are going to walk. But we want to make sure no one's standing still. Mm. So as more
and more... Great picture. Great visual.
Yeah, and I think that's... When we look at professional development for adults, no matter what it is, whether you're rolling out a new software system or new technology, or you're building an intentional culture, you're going to have runners, you're going to have joggers, and you're going to have walkers. And that's the nature of how people are. I think you would say that when I got introduced to R Factor, I was a runner. I ran with this. But there are people on our staff who were a little bit more hesitant, a little bit more fearful of change. So
Did you have any out-and-out resistors?
Not anyone who was out and out in my face resisting. I think one of the things we run into in education is you have some seasoned educators who believe this too shall pass. And if you look at the average stay of superintendents as a leader in Ohio...
I mean, let me go back. So when you say this too shall pass, you mean they've experienced initiatives that someone came up with, were launched, and then after 2 or 3 years, that initiative went away and another one came in their place.
Yeah, and when you look at leadership at the building level or at the superintendent's level, the average stay of a superintendent is 3 years, but teachers don't move around a lot. So how many teachers do we know that in their career have been through 8, 9 superintendents? So it's, hey, I'll outlast this initiative if I don't believe in this initiative. Now,
so you can't blame them. I mean, that seems to me a fairly... That's like a mental health response.
Yeah, just look at accountability in public education. And, you know, we had proficiency tests and Ohio graduation tests and PARCC exams and error exams, and it's whatever we have. This is going to go away, and there'll be a what's next. So why would I change?
Same thing happens in corporate America. Same thing happens in businesses and hospitals and organizations across the world. That is the same phenomenon that we see. That this too shall pass, outlast the latest initiative, and I have a great deal of empathy for that, because I think we've trained employees, associates that way, to be honest with you, and we tell them when the new thing comes, oh, this one is new and it's not going to go away, but oftentimes they do go away. Well, so how's this been different? How'd you break through that fog, that noise, that barrier?
Part of it is the culture that's been in Hilliard for decades. My predecessor was here for 15 years. Dale McVeigh. Dale's predecessor, Roger Nels, was here for 15 years. So the wise decisions in this community in hiring, and when you look at the leadership in our school district, it's not the rapid turnover that you see in a lot of other places. So we have a culture that we're going to do things well, and the leader is going to be here for a while. So I had that to my advantage starting out, right out the gate. The other part is you got to be smart in how you do it. We're saying this isn't new. We're saying this is what you believe. We've talked to our people, and you find those key stakeholders as you go through this process. So, and when you don't do it in a one-day session and then don't talk about it again until the next PD day, now you're saying what's important. Part of what those beliefs and behaviors need to show from me as the leader is not only am I saying this is what we believe, I'm behaving in that way. Mm-hmm. And if we said culture trumps strategy, but all we did then was talk about strategy, how many places do you see say culture's what's most important, but then we're going to look at our test results?
Yeah, I say all the time, you can't get a culture that you don't talk about. You have to, and I'm so impressed with and excited about your guys' continuous communication of the culture, your continuous communication of E plus R equals O and how it applies in the 6 disciplines, and it seems like it gains momentum every year. John, what advice would you give to any organizational leader listening to this episode about building culture and training people in R-Factor skills? Whether it's a school or a hospital or a business, what advice would you give to organizational leaders about building culture and training behavior skill?
Well, the first thing, and I'm going to quote Tim Kite on this, is if it's not happening in you, it can't happen through you. If you're a leader and you think this is going to be a quick fix, but you don't believe it, if you're not willing to make this in your core, part of your DNA.
It starts with you.
Don't bother.
Yeah.
And some of that means having tough decisions on what was important before. Because if culture's going to be the most important thing, culture's got to be the most important thing. So you have to, first of all, commit to this yourself. And then you need to, kind of as ripples in a water, when you drop a stone in water, who's your next ring? They've got to believe it. And who's the next ring? They've got to believe it. Because you can't be everywhere. But as you look at your organization, this has to trickle down. And this starts with you. And if you've got someone who's at your second level, or you've got a principal who doesn't believe it, it's not going to be implemented with fidelity. Mm-hmm. So you've got to build this momentum from you to the people who you work with if you want this to work.
I'm hearing you say that there's these layers of leadership that you target and that you pursue, and that is the word relentless a legitimate word?
Yes, it's legitimate. Yeah, and for the people who don't, when you look at the support and the accountability of this is where we're going, and if you're on our team and you're not going here, how do I get you to where you want to be? And if you're not going to be here, what's the accountability for the team? Because if we're going to talk about power of team, if we're going to talk about culture being the most important, and you're the leader, if there are people who aren't on board, there comes a point you've got to get them off board. Because when you allow and you permit certain behaviors, you promote that behavior and you give people who may be on that fence an excuse.
So there's a lot of positive communication, there's a lot of positive commitment, there's a lot of positive messages, but there's also an accountability factor. And you made a great statement. If you permit it, you promote it. So you give everyone the opportunity to commit, you establish the standards, you do the training, you invest in people, teach them ERO. But at some point, if someone's behavior is inconsistent with the behavioral standards that you've set, you're going to hold them accountable to that, and that's not allowed to continue.
Yeah, for example, let's just say we have someone on the team who doesn't believe in the power of the team, who thinks they're above the team decisions, who thinks I'm smarter than the team. That person's not going to be able to stand it or last on my team, because my folks who know me have heard me say, I'm never the smartest person in the room, but I find the smartest people and get them in my room. We've got an amazing team. 8 people sitting around working is always smarter than one. So if you're that person who thinks I'm going to do this better than everybody else, you're going to have a problem, and we're going to find a way to move you on.
So final round of questions. And this is, I wanted to start here, but I wanted to get through the bigger picture and have everyone understand the larger strategy and what your timeline looked like. But ultimately, this is about getting the training to the students. This is about getting the students trained in behavior skill, E plus R equals O. Talk about the impact this, and you said from pre-K to seniors in high school, they've been trained in this. What impact has this had? What have you seen in terms of results on students? What's happened to kids at Hilliard City Schools as a result of the kind of leadership you've described, the kind of culture that you've described, and being trained in E plus R equals O?
We have seen a decrease in discipline problems. We have seen an increase in conversations. We have seen a whole different level of engagement, which when you look at where we are as a society now, where there seems to be so much intolerance, this is a tool that allows us to be civil with each other. Mm-hmm. The best conversations that I have is when parents come home, parents share what their students come home with. And it is amazing to hear a parent tell a story on how their kid gets them to press pause.
We've heard that in the business community here in Central Ohio, where we'll be talking to some business person who works in an organization someplace here in the greater Columbus area, or even greater Columbus area, and we'll be talking about the R factor, and they'll look at us, wait a second, my third grader is hearing that in school. And I said, they must go to Hilliard. And it's a pretty cool thing to see. It's my understanding that a lot of the R factor training that's been done, particularly in middle school and high school here, has been done by the students themselves.
Yeah, we've held R factor camps for student leaders. And as we roll this out and go deeper each and every year, the key to doing that at the student level, at the high school level, and at the middle school level is training students, because teachers can give the nuts and bolts. And if we go back to the foundational academic skills and then the life skills, the teachers can give the foundational skills to R factor. We can teach, here are your 6 R factor disciplines. It's the kids who talk about it. Mm-hmm. It's the kids who on the football field will tell each other that they need to adapt and adjust, that they need to make a difference, who in a classroom will say, press pause. Because when you start implementing R factor with your beliefs, it becomes part of the overall vocabulary, and the kids are the heart of that for us. I've had moms at grocery stores tell us that R factor have changed their lives in their homes, because kids are teaching this to parents.
Wow.
And that's not necessary in everybody's home. But we'll also have homes where how proud are parents when Cardinal Health is rolling this out, or Huntington Bank is having these conversations, and the kids know more than mom and dad. Mm-hmm. I would also say that as a school district, there is a responsibility to tell parents what you're doing. And you were part of one of our most successful kind of steps along our journey in that second year. Right before we rolled this out to students, we held R factor nights for parents. And on 7 consecutive Sunday nights in the evening, you gave an R Factor overview. And then we had different folks teach each of those disciplines over 6 consecutive Sunday nights. And parents started to hear it and they wanted more. And it's really great when you can have that engagement at the parent level so that they know what we're teaching with their kids. Because sometimes parents hear that we're teaching values. And it's like, oh,
which value system?
Which values? But when you say, no, we're teaching your kids to have personal responsibility.
Right.
Now it's, oh, okay, these are universal values.
Timeless truth. And then, the core of R Factor is intentional thinking, decision-making, intentional action, and be thoughtful about it. Know what reference points you're using, and there is no dictation or demand that this is exactly what you should believe. No, we're equipping you with skills, mental skills, if you will, to be able to be clearer about what's intentional and purposeful for you, and that's an awesome thing. What impact have you seen R Factor's had on the academic performance of students?
Well, I think as it's great because it's timed up at the same time that we're asking students to think differently. So as we move from all standardized tests, as we move from a simple way of regurgitating information to a way of problem solving, we are now teaching students that failure isn't an end, it's a beginning. We're teaching them that this is a journey, and we're giving them the skills that are simultaneously in tandem being taught with new ways to show that you know things. So going back to your original question about why were we so ready to jump on and what made this work 4 years ago? Education's changing, and this is giving us the tools to change education. And I'm proud of that in Hilliard. I think we're changing it as fast as anyone else is, as we're preparing kids to be successful. And so much of this is about balance. We don't stop teaching those foundational skills. We teach those foundational skills. We have kids who are taking the ACT with purpose and intentionality, but let's say they run into that test prompt on the ACT that gets them stumped. They may have gotten frustrated before. Now maybe they press pause.
So R Factor is helping students at Hilliard City Schools, and I'll make a statement, you comment on it, helping the students be more academically successful, more emotionally, socially successful, helping them implement things like growth mindset more effectively, because we all have read Carol Dweck's work and we love it. R Factor actually helps people do that more practically, if you will. And recently, Angela Duckworth's great book, Grit, R Factor helps people actually do it. It enhances all of that. Is that an accurate statement?
Yes, without question. And whatever's next, we'll be prepared to embrace and we'll be prepared to do. We are right now, as a school district, partnering with a group called Panorama, where we're measuring social emotional learning attributes. And we're setting goals for growth in our students around grit, around hope, around belonging. That's all in alignment with what we do with R Factor. It's all part of who we are. And as you undertake each step along the journey, R Factor, I believe, is going to be timeless, because as we adapt and adjust, and as we change, and as we get ready for what's next, we have the skills to do that as an organization, and our students have the skills to do that for whatever they go on to in their next endeavor.
So event plus response equals outcome is how life works. Our job is to get good at it and to help students apply it to their lives and get better every day. John, thank you so much for being a part of this, the Focus Street podcast. This has been a fantastic conversation. This has been, I'd like to go another hour or two. I mean, this is just so exciting because of what you guys are doing. I want to personally thank you for your leadership here at Hilliard and in the community. And it's you've influenced not just the people here in your own district, but you've influenced and inspired, I think, educators throughout our country. And hopefully this message gets out even more through the podcast. So, folks, leaders build culture. Culture drives behavior, and behavior produces results. And that's simply the way all organizations and teams function. It's the physics of any organization, whether it's a hospital or a manufacturing company or a public education environment like a elementary school or a middle school or a high school. And what you heard today is a leader who has a vision and who has the discipline to follow up on that vision and to reach out, connect, and then equip all of the other leaders in his organization with the skills to build an elite culture, to drive elite behavior, and to produce elite results. And the thing that I took away from this more than anything, John, is that you're not in a hurry, but you're absolutely relentless about simply doing it, and you've inspired others within your leadership network to do the same thing. So folks, think about your organization. Think about the current state of your culture. Think about the current level of effectiveness of your leaders. And then think about the behavior skill of your people. And if the leadership skill isn't strong enough, you got to go build it. If your culture isn't clear enough and the behaviors aren't in alignment with what you want, you have to go build it. And if the behavior skills of your people aren't where they need to be, teach them the R factor. You got to go build it. Now go do the work.